The B Plus Wrestling Podcast.
The Moose.
You might not be an A, but you are a B plus.
Check it out! Here we go! You wanna mess with us? Cause we're steady on the ground, steady on the ground. You wanna mess with us? Cause we're steady on the ground, steady on the ground.
All right, ladies, gents, and non-binary friends, welcome to another B Plus podcast. I'm your host, Greg Unchained. Today is Friday. You know what that means. It's Aussie Grapps Day. It's our favorite day here on the B Plus podcast. Today we sit down to take a look at what's happening in the world of Australian professional wrestling. We also like to speak to an Aussie grappler or grappler adjacent person. This week, I'm speaking with someone who has a bit of a cult following almost on Twitter, amongst Australian wrestling Twitter at least. Jodi McAllister. She's an author. She's a professor. And she's a new wrestling fan, and we're going to talk to her about her budding MCW fandom. We're going to fantasy book the MCW NINE tournament, which is the women's championship tournament coming up this weekend. But before we get to that, let's take a very, very brief look at this week in Australian wrestling news. I say we're going to take a really brief look because as I record this, it is 2 p.m. on Friday. And normally I have this done on Thursday, but Thursdays have gotten way crazy now with your NXT and AEW and doing flagship show and all that sort of stuff. So I think that our schedule is going to change in the coming months, and Aussie Grapps Friday may move to a different day just to make it easier, because Thursday was the day I used to do all my Aussie Grapps stuff, and it's getting a lot harder. So I haven't really got much news just for the sake of it's 2 p.m. on Friday, and in order to get this out today, I'm going to keep this relatively quick. I do want to shout out a couple of really good promos that I saw drop this week. Kingsley and Xena, obviously, Lux, they do fantastic promo work, and they've got a video out now prepping for MCW NINE for their women's championship tournament, and they're taking it very seriously, and there's a montage of them training, and it's amazing. I won't ruin the punchline for you, but please, 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 find this video on MCW's Facebook or YouTube. When I tried to watch it on YouTube, it was taken down due to some kind of copyright strike. I have no idea what for. Maybe because of the music that's playing during the montage. I don't know, but it was taken down. So I found it on Facebook, though. Definitely worth having a watch. It's hilarious. There was also Pro Wrestling League in Queensland. They dropped like a mini documentary almost. It's only like a couple of minutes long, like 4 minutes long or so. But it's following Todd Eastman as he's the new general manager for Pro Wrestling League. And it's following him as he's sort of signing matches and figuring out how to do things. And it's really cool the way they do it. Like it's like a mini documentary, and he's driving in his car and he's like, I thought that being a general manager was just come out and say it's a tag team match player, but there's actually a lot involved. And he goes into it and stuff, and it's really fun. It's really fun. It's a different look at being a general manager and making of matches and that sort of thing. So I definitely recommend checking that out as well. Now, something that has passed across my desk a few times this week is tweets about certain promotions not paying wrestlers and things like that. Nobody seems to want to name and shame, and I talk about this a lot. I talk about, we want the wrestling industry in Australia to get better, and so name and shame is important. Like it's I can understand why people don't want to do that necessarily, especially if their paydays are on the line, but here's the thing, you're not getting paid, and I'm just going to go out and do it. I'm going to go out and say it. I had an advertising deal with Pro Wrestling Connect, which is one Adam Graham, the same person who runs Kingdom Pro Wrestling, and he's not paying people. He hasn't paid me. I have ads that I ran for multiple months. We had a deal in place that was supposed to go for 6 months, and I was getting a certain amount of dollars per month, and I've received 1 month's payment. I ran 3 months of ads. I stopped after the 3 months when I realized, look, it looks like I'm not getting any money, and I pushed and I pushed, and I got 1 month, and I'm like, I'm still not going to air any more ads until you catch up and then pay in advance. It's just not paying. You have an agreement with someone, you provide this, I will provide this, and then you don't hold up your end of the agreement. And the same goes with wrestling, right? If you're going to run a wrestling promotion, Kingdom Pro Wrestling, I mean, I assume that Scarlett Bordeaux got paid, right? I assume that James Storm got paid when he came down. And wrestling fans are paying their money to go see you. They're buying the tickets. Why aren't the wrestlers who are performing getting their agreed upon pay? It's not on. It's not acceptable. We can't support these kinds of practices. So do with that information what you will. If you hear that and say, well, Kingdom Pro Wrestling aren't paying the wrestlers, I'm not going to go. And if that means that there's one less place for wrestlers to work in the Newcastle Hunter Valley area. Look, that's unfortunate and it sucks, and I am a huge champion of having as many places for people to work as possible. That's why I was a champion for Iron Fist Pro Wrestling and stuff, but then when they didn't pay people, I call it out. I say, no, people should be getting paid. Everyone involved with Iron Fist Pro got paid eventually, but they didn't get paid on the agreed upon schedule, which is, it's a problem. It's a problem. If you can't run the business, you should not be running the business. And it sucks if a place has to close, if a place is not able to keep going, that sucks. But at the end of the day, we want places for people to work where they're getting paid to work. These people are going out, and these wrestlers are going out and putting their bodies on the line, their lives on the line to entertain us, and we are paying our ticket for them, and someone else is making off with the cash. Or if they're not making off with the cash, if they're losing money or breaking even and unable to pay because they were planning on paying with profits and then the show didn't make a profit, well, then they're just not good at what they're doing, and we need to stop supporting that. People working for free is not acceptable. People not getting their agreed upon rates is not acceptable. And paying for getting advertising and then not actually paying for it, it's not acceptable. I'm still hoping, obviously, that the money will come through eventually. But, after name and shame, it probably won't. And I accept that. But I felt like it was more important to get the information out there so that people know who you should and should not be supporting. Because we don't want dodgy bullshit in Australian wrestling. We want Australian wrestling to grow. We want people who are professional. We want people who are doing the right thing by their staff, by all the people that they interact with and work with, by the fans, by everyone involved. We want everyone to be doing the right thing. And saying, I will pay this, and then not paying it, that's not the right thing, and we shouldn't be supporting that. So do with that what you will. Kingdom Pro Wrestling Connect. There you go. Named and shamed. Let's move on. Let's have a chat in a much more positive light. We've got a huge, huge weekend of wrestling coming up, especially in Melbourne. Melbourne City Wrestling, their 9th anniversary show, MCW NINE. It's 2 nights, tonight, Friday night and Saturday night. They've got a women's championship tournament. The show is pretty much 50-50 women, which is amazing. 50-50 women and men, which is amazing. And we're going to have a chat to Jodi McAllister about that, about her budding MCW fandom, about a bit of her academic work and stuff like that as well. And then if you stick around after the interview, I'll let you know what's happening this weekend near you.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey guys, just a reminder, if you want to hear all of these wonderful B Plus podcast episodes completely ad-free, make sure you head over to Patreon or Podbean, where we are the featured podcast this week. You can subscribe for as little as $1 a month up to $10 a month, where anything you want to help us with, it really helps out. It's going to help us grow the site. It's going to help us redesign some things, and everything that we get through this and through the advertising as well is all going straight back into the podcast so that we can get Aussie Grapps out there for the rest of the world to hear about, for the rest of the world to see, so we can grow this mission of watch global, support local, and build indie wrestling. So if you want to be a part of that and get some really cool rewards like call-in shows, bonus episodes, ad-free like I mentioned, then head over to patreon.com/theb+ and subscribe today. Hey everyone, just want to take a second to tell you about one of our new sponsors, OUTBREAK NUTRITION. OUTBREAK NUTRITION are creating supplements for survival, sharper minds, quicker reflexes, all the energy you need to take your performance to the next level, whether that be on the field, in the gym, on the gaming field. That's right, they have specifically designed gaming supplements as well to help you focus on those late night sessions. They even sell coffee, you guys, at OUTBREAK NUTRITION. You can get coffee pods, you can get coffee beans, you can get supplements for the bedroom as well if you want to enhance your performance there. These are performance enhancing supplements for every aspect of your life, specifically designed by gamers, for gamers, to stay fit and healthy in the gym, to stay sharp and focused on the game, and to dominate in all areas of life. So check out OUTBREAKNutrition.com, and for being a listener of our podcast, they will give you 10% off your order when you enter the code B+. That is BPLUS at checkout. So make sure, if you want to stay on top of your game, if you want to take your performance to the next level, OUTBREAKNutrition.com, enter the code B+ at checkout. All right, my guest at this time, joining me by the magic of the internet, as they so often do, as long as my dodgy Australian internet holds up, she is not our usual guest. She's not a grappler or grappler adjacent person necessarily. She is an author, a young adult fiction author, a professor, a newish wrestling fan with hilarious Twitter takes, and a doctor of romance. I think we can say that. Jodi McAllister, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well. I realized because of daylight savings with the way we scheduled our interview that I'm halfway through AEW on TNT right now. So if I get distracted, I do apologize. Highly unprofessional of me, I know.
That is totally fine. If you get distracted, I'll just ask you what AEW is because I don't really know.
So AEW is the new league on TNT. They're calling it the new league, which is an interesting branding choice. But it's a new wrestling promotion that was started by the Elite, Kenny Omega, Cody Rhodes, who you may know from WWE potentially, or as Stardust, and Chris Jericho, and all of those guys are all Elite Wrestling now.
Awesome.
And they've just started up last week. Yeah.
Oh, Chris Jericho is the one that got his belt stolen, yeah? I know who that is.
Yes. He lost his belt, and then he turned it into a meme with the little bit of the bubbly thing and went completely viral.
Well, the virality caught my attention, so I at least feel like I have a little bit of acquaintance now.
Yeah, it was the only thing in my internet feed for like a solid week was that little bit of the bubbly memes. I even made one myself. Like, I got on board. I was so hyped about it. I was like, yes, let's do a Squirtle meme. Because, Bubble Attack. I don't know if you're a Pokemon fan.
Look, I am passingly familiar with Pokemon because I am a person that lives in the world.
Yes, of course. You've just gotten back. Thank you so much for coming on the show, first of all. You've just gotten back from overseas, yeah? From Manila?
Yeah, I was in Manila. I got a little bit of funding with my research team to do some work on romance fiction in the Philippines, which has nothing to do with wrestling at all, but was a lot of fun. And we went to a live event there. And despite the fact it was about romance novels, some of the things about kind of the way the audience reacted actually kind of reminded me of wrestling a little bit, which was a crossover I did not expect.
Yeah, how did it remind you of wrestling? Like, just the way the crowd reacted to the readings?
Yeah, absolutely. They were really vocal in their reactions, and I think really they were vocal about which bits in the readings they thought were especially cute or lovely. But it really did remind me of the kind of emotional reactions that people have at wrestling and how they'll cheer for the people that they love and they'll aggressively boo the people that they hate. I mean, I think the last MCW show proved that the audience is not averse to booing for 10 solid minutes. So
yeah, 15
yeah.
Actually. I watched it on the replay because I'm over here in Adelaide, so I don't get to see it live, but watched the replay on Vimeo. And yeah, that last segment, Dowie was trying to talk for like 15 minutes and they just would not let him.
Yeah, I think I might have been the only person in the room not booing because as I have been extremely unsubtle about, Dowie is my favorite because of his cats. So
yes.
Yeah, I was
right.
I was the only one on his team.
Fair enough. So no, we want to get to know you as well. So we're not just going to talk about wrestling, and obviously you're over there in Manila doing research. But I do want to ask: did you catch any Philippine wrestling? Because that's a thing. There's wrestling in the Philippines.
Did not know that, but I am sure I will go back because this is a long-term research project. So next time I go, I'll make sure I don't schedule quite so many interviews back to back. So I have a little minute to go out and see what's happening in Philippine wrestling. Tell me about Philippine wrestling.
Yeah, there's a couple, like there's a Manila Wrestling Federation, I believe, but the big one is Philippine Wrestling Revolution. And they're in and around that area as well. And they're doing good things. Like the whole Southeast Asian scene is getting really hot. Like independent wrestling is huge at the moment, as I'm sure you're aware, having come into the world of MCW. But yeah, there's some really good stuff happening in Philippines wrestling. TJP, who was just in Australia recently, he did some stuff in Sydney, and he's a former WWE Cruiserweight champion. He's going over to the Philippines, which is his sort of home country. And doing some wrestling there with the Philippine Wrestling Revolution. It's definitely a show worth checking out.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, I'm very intrigued now.
Yeah, I'll send you some links so that
Please do.
Next time because if you're going to be going back and forth, it's definitely worth checking out. What does I'm curious. This is people may tune out for a second here, but
that's fine.
What does research in romance literature look like?
Oh, well, I've taken a couple of different approaches because I've been doing this for a little while. It started during my PhD. So I've done, like, my PhD looked at representations of virginity loss. And so I did a lot of work on romance fiction there where virginity loss is a big trope. So a lot of that was just like straightforward literary studies, textual analysis. But I was also looking at how kind of the history of that evolved over time. My technical job field is literary history. So I'm really interested in how cultural representations shift over time. But I've since become more interested in a couple of different aspects of this. I'm really interested in kind of the publishing of romance fiction because they're at the forefront of like different revolutions in publishing, like the digital revolution. E-publishing was basically driven by romance fiction. So I'm really interested in what some people think is the the more boring side of the field, the publishing side.
Right.
But what I was doing in the Philippines was they've got a fascinating, almost entirely self-published community where they've established their own little rules and norms for what their English language romance should look like. So I was over there with my team interviewing a bunch of different authors and asking them about everything to do with their romance writing lives, how their community works, what they like to see in romance fiction, what Filipino romance fiction looks like compared to like romance fiction from the West. I've done so much work on so many different aspects of romance because what I'm really interested in as well is not just in romance fiction, representations of love more broadly. So I've done some work on soap opera. I do a lot of work on the Bachelor franchise. Anyone who follows me on Twitter will have realized this.
I wanted to talk to you about this, yes.
Yes, I can. You might not want to open that can of worms because I can talk about the Bachelor franchise for an extremely long time.
Well, I wanted to ask in relation to, so obviously, I mean, The Bachelor, reality TV, love TV stuff. We have an Australian wrestler who's taking part in one of those shows at the moment. Not The Bachelor or Bachelorette, but
Love
a show
Island.
called Love Island. Yes, Love Island. Have you checked that one out at all?
I watch it very, very casually. I feel like I can't get involved in another show like I did in The Bachelor because then I won't have a life left. And
Fair
even
enough.
though I essentially have two full-time careers between like my author life and my academic life, sometimes I just need a minute, I can't commit to another show.
Yeah, of course. Have you considered, because I mean, something you mentioned there in your research and stuff that stuck out to me was you're a literary historian. Yeah, so like how depictions change over time. Now, I know also in your Twitter bio you do describe yourself as a feminist. Have you thought of looking at because wrestling, you can look at wrestling as literature, right? Have you thought of looking at it as the changing depiction of women throughout wrestling? Because the whole women's evolution things happened very recently, and I think that'd be a pretty interesting academic field to look at.
Yeah, look, I would have to do a bunch more work because I'm not conversant enough in the history of wrestling to feel like I can talk about it with authority. But I've done a little bit of poking around, and there is actually an academic journal for professional wrestling studies that I've been sort of spying on every now and again.
You're kidding.
Oh, yeah, it's real. I can send you the link if you want.
Yes, please.
Yeah, and one thing I'm really interested in at the moment, because of the way my research focuses on romance, is the relationship between Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins and how that plays out, and the way they sort of like, it's pretty much the only thing I follow in WWE. I follow the women and don't care about the men, basically, is my approach to WWE, which I follow extremely vaguely.
Yeah, at the moment, in WWE, the women are kind of actually the best thing happening in the WWE at the moment.
That's what I sort of gathered, but considering I just don't care about the men at all, I feel like I can't make that claim personally. But the way
there is an exception with the women at the moment is the way they're doing the Lana, Rusev, Bobby Lashley thing. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh yeah, my friend Kevin Chiat sent me some stuff about that, and it looks troubling, shall we say?
Yeah, you've basically got Bobby Lashley in the Mandingo role, and it's not good. It's not even good TV. Like I'm a fan of some trashy TV, right? But this isn't even good trashy TV. If you get what I'm saying, so it's pretty awful.
Yeah, and because they're IRL married, yeah, Rusev and Lana?
Rusev and Lana, yeah, they're married in real life. So it's just, and as well, like when you go into like the backstage politics or whatever, or what we think we know, because you never really know with wrestling. But what the dirt sheets and stuff report is that Rusev was thinking of leaving. He was going to sit out his contract or whatever, and he wasn't very happy there. but they convinced him to stay and he signed a new contract, and now they're just embarrassing him on national television. So
that's so horrible. I mean, the other thing I can tell about WWE, and a reason that I will not permit myself to get more invested, is that they're politically just horrendous.
I stopped giving them money after the Saudi Arabia situation. There's a lot to look at there. But let's look at some more positive things. So how did you become a wrestling fan? Obviously, romance, literature, you've got a PhD, all that stuff. That's very far away from the world of wrestling in theory.
Yeah. Well, look, I didn't really get into wrestling until late last year when I went to my first MCW show, but my relationship with it goes back a little bit earlier. So during my PhD, I was also writing my first novel, Smart Plan, terrible plan.
Do two at once.
Extremely bad plan. It worked out for me in the long term, but in the short term, I was just working so much and so constantly. And
I'm just imagining at some point there was a Britney Spears style breakdown.
Oh,
there had to be, at least once.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky in that I had basically nothing else going on in my life at that point. I'm quite an obsessive personality, so I was really tunnel visioned. If I'd had anything else going on, if I don't know, had a partner or children or anything like that at the time, I couldn't have coped with that division of my emotional attention. But I was basically just head down working. I am a little bit of a workaholic, if that isn't clear. But near Christmas, my sister and I were at my parents' place. We were both poor students, so we were drinking their nice wine, taking advantage of that opportunity. And we were channel surfing, and we found this 1 hour cut of WWE. And because we were very drunk, it was extremely humorous to us. And we worked out that it was on once a week at about, I think it was 11 p.m. on a Thursday or something like that on Channel 9.
Right.
And that used to be the 1 hour I took out of my week, apart from the half an hour I would take religiously every weekday between 4:30 and 5 to watch Love of My Life, The Bold and the Beautiful. Just 11 on Thursday, we would sit down and we would watch this ridiculous wrestling. We had no context for it, and because it was such a short cut, they were jumping around all over the place because they just randomly picked the bits which were the best bits, and there was very little continuity in terms of story, but it was just bonkers and wild. And I was also... sorry, you ask.
So your big break from writing your fictions and also doing your research for your PhD, your big break was basically an hour and a half, half an hour a day and then an hour a week of just soap operas, ridiculous, over-the-top, cheesy storylines. And
the wrestling was particularly relieving for me because at the time, PhD scholarships are not very much, so I was doing a lot of freelance writing to supplement my income. And one of the things I was doing was recapping The Bold and the Beautiful. So even when I was watching it, I was writing about it. Wrestling,
you're still working.
Yeah. Wrestling was the one thing I didn't have to write about. I didn't have to think about. It was the one time I got to turn my brain off. And I was also working as a theatre critic at the time. And there were sort of two things that happened to me. One, they sent me to review a WWE house show. And
nice.
I took it's probably still on the internet somewhere, that review. No clue what was going on. The one thing you
don't need to for house shows. House shows are just a bit of fun.
Yeah. I think I took my sister with me because we used to watch WWE together at 11 p.m. on Thursdays. And in the main event, it was John Cena, who I knew who that was. And a guy whose name I had to look up recently because I couldn't remember, but it was R-Truth. And he was, I think, a heel at the time. And so he had "shut up" written across the back of his pants, whereas I think normally it says "what's up,"
Yes.
And my sister was so taken by that she bought a pair of boots and bedazzled "shut up" on the side and just wore them around, and it was extremely cool. But the other thing that happened to me is that I was reviewing this other show called School Dance, which was set in the 80s, and it was a lovely teen show. And they had this one character who was the jock, and because the main character was a nerd. And he never spoke. He just appeared in the nerds like frightened nightmares. And he would just come on stage and be lit in like blue and be extremely muscled and look ominous. And so they used to rotate, depending on when they were touring, different actors through the part. And when they were in Sydney, the guy they had in the part was a wrestler. And I didn't know this, but it was an opening night. And afterwards I was chatting to him in the foyer and I was like, oh, what else do you do? And he was like, oh yeah, I'm a wrestler. And I was like, oh, that's not just WWE. That's a whole thing. And he was like, yeah, man.
Yeah.
And then he probably started backing away slowly because I asked him so many questions. I was so fascinated. He was like, who is this strange and terrifying woman that won't stop asking me questions? But that opened my eyes to the fact that independent wrestling existed. But it wasn't something I ever got an opportunity to really see till I moved to Melbourne, which I did in 2018. And my friend Katie was like, you know, there's wrestling on at Thornbury. And I was like, no, I didn't. Can we go? And she was like, yep. And now here we are. We both got totally hooked. We always go together.
Amazing. And so how was your first MCW? Which was the first show that you attended? Do you remember?
It was MCW Endgame. And then I went to the girl show, which was, I think, the week after. So I did 2 in the space of about a week. And they hooked me, particularly the girl show. Like, I was
going to ask you about the girl shows and whether you've been to those.
Yeah, like I like watching them, man. I really enjoy the storyline, but man, like I'm a huge advocate for women's sport, and I love watching the women. So I'm absolutely delighted that at MCW 9, it looks like there's gender parity. It looks like it's going to be at least 50% women, and I can't even tell you how stoked that makes me.
Yeah, night 1 announced there's 8 matches. And 4 of them are the women's matches for the Invitational for the Women's Championship, which is amazing.
I am so psyched. So psyched.
Yeah. Who are your favorite wrestlers that so from going to the MCW shows, who has stuck out to you the most, do you think?
So in the women, I mean, this is such a like basic bitch answer, but it's Kellyanne Avery and Indy Hartwell. Particularly Indy Hartwell. I know she's gone on to WWE, but she was my favorite, so I'm really sad that she's gone.
I'm a big fan of Indy Hartwell. Yeah. I rock my Support Indie Wrestling shirt a lot.
Oh, I love her. And it always made me really sad that the crowds booed her so much. And they, like, I know she was a heel, but I was like, no, can't you see how great she is?
She gave it back to him, though. She invited it. She welcomed it.
Yeah, but, I loved her. And there was one moment in particular which broke my heart where I think it was one of her last shows where she took the mic and was like, look, I just want to be serious for a minute. You know, I'm moving on. I'm moving Melbourne. And someone yelled out, oh, you think you're all that, do you? And I was like, shut up. Shut up. She is all that. She is incredible. Don't you dare sass Indy Hartwell. So I'm really sad that she's gone.
I love how invested you are. I love how...
Yeah. Oh, I'm a very emotional viewer.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people do, because that's why she got such a respectful like farewell at the end of the last show, like at her last show that she was at, right?
Yeah, and
because she did build a big fan base.
Yeah, she's just so great, and I would have loved her to be the first women's champion, and I'm kind of a little bit sad that won't happen. But I think there are lots of good alternatives, obviously. In the men, I've got a very clear favorite, and it's Dowie James because of his cats. Not just because of his cats. I think he's a really good storyteller, and I'm really I love this like plot line where he's turned heel, not just because I totally predicted it and I felt really smart, but but I think he's a really good storyteller. And I mean, I can't tell what's good wrestling and not good wrestling technically. Like, I mean, maybe if someone very obviously screwed up, I might be able to tell, but you know how the usual kind of thing that you hear about wrestling is you're like, oh, I like wrestling, and people are like, oh, don't you know it's fake? I'm like the opposite, where every time they do something, I'm convinced that this time they really hurt themselves, this time they really died. So
that's the best. The head drops do that for me. Whenever anyone lands on their head, I don't know how you learn to land on your head, and I have trained in like the basic course of pro wrestling, like the very basics, and I'm just like, no, landing on your head terrifies the hell out of me.
Yeah. So, like, I think the match between Richie Taylor and DCT at the last show was the first. Is it called hardcore wrestling?
Yeah,
That was the
yeah.
first one I'd seen, and I couldn't cope with it. I was watching that one through my fingers because I was like, nope, you can't learn to get glassed. I'm from Wollongong.
No.
I would have known if you could learn to get glassed, considering that's like Wollongong's like distinctive feature.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
No,
about
it's
10 years
it's not
ago,
something that
yeah.
you can teach or learn.
Yeah. 10 years
At
ago,
all.
I did an RSA, and they told us that 9 of the 10 most dangerous pubs in New South Wales were in Wollongong. And so I did not take up that career as a bartender.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Wise choice.
I can't tell what's technically good wrestling or not, but I can tell what's good storytelling. And that's why I love those 3 women, and I really like watching Dowie James because I think I can always tell what the story is. I can always tell what's happening. And Loverboy Lockie Hendricks for the same reason. I think he's a really good storyteller, even though he's such a like shitful villain. The first match where I really realized the potential for wrestling storytelling was the Iron Man match that he and Dowie James fought, and that had such a clear narrative. And I was hooked.
Yeah, and you got 2 of the best storytellers in the company coming together, and it was an incredible match. Loverboy is fascinating to me as well because he's always in character.
Yeah,
just like I did an interview with him, and it was one of the few that I actually did in person because he was here in Adelaide for Adelaide Championship Wrestling, and I go backstage into the. And there he is. He's like, "Oh, you're the B plus, are you? Why the hell would you want to be B plus? Wouldn't you want to be A plus?" And he just straight away. And I was like, "Oh man, I have to interview you." And I thought we were going to talk like we're talking. And it was an experience. Let's put it that way.
That would be wild. It would be exhausting, I think. I mean, for both people involved, I can't imagine trying to be in character that long. Like, I mean,
it was a lot of fun. He just sat there looking at me and chewing his gum. And like I couldn't see his eyes. He had the glasses on. And I was terrified. I'm backstage at a wrestling show. There's a bunch of muscly men walking around, and I can feel him staring holes through me through the sunglasses. It was terrifying.
Oh, wow. I'm sure him just sitting there and chewing gum would have made great audio.
It did, actually. I did get bits of the chewing gum because the microphone I use is like one of those ASMR mics, you know? So at one point he did get a little bit too close and you can hear the chewing of the gum. It's great. I wanted to ask you about MCW NINE though. So obviously, Are you going to both nights?
I sure am. I'm very excited. And I'm taking different friends both nights. So I'm going with my friend Katie, who I always go with on night 1, but then she's doing a panel at PAX on the Saturday. So I'm bringing new people, and I'm bringing a really good friend of mine who's never been to wrestling, but who's a playwright. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how many people I can convert. Because
make some new fans.
Yeah, look, by the time I'm done, I will have brought half of the publishing industry and all of academia along to MCW. So if you start seeing a lot of like feminist academics running around, you'll know whose fault that is. That was me.
We can blame you. That's fine. No, that's great. I've new fans and especially people in new fields and different areas. Because I mean, you know what? We're going to talk about this shortly as well. I would love to see more books in the being published about wrestling. I would love to see that.
Look,
right.
I do have like a little spark of an idea because I write YA. I think I could do a very sweet little wrestling book, but I would have to like talk to some people and do a lot more research before I felt like I was in a place where I could write that. But I think it's a really rich ground. And also I've just because what I do as a romance academic, whenever I get interested in something, I go and see if there's romance fiction of it. Like, you know, rule 34 of the internet is that if you can think of something, there's porn of it. The same kind of holds true with romance novels. So I found one immediately by Diana Hart of the Hart family, who I understand are big deal wrestlers. And I read it and it is not good. It is very
I saw your Twitter thread.
disturbing. But I've since delved deep into the wilds of Kindle Unlimited and I've uncovered, I think I've found about 10 now. One of them was in rhyme and that was an experience. Also, calling it a book was maybe a little bit generous. I think it was maybe 5,000 words long.
Okay.
But I found another...
So it's kind of like an extended poem.
Yeah, and also it was bad, and they kept... Oh, I shouldn't call out other authors. That's bad authorial practice. But they kept referring to the male wrestler throughout as the big dog, and I'm like, that's Roman Reigns, isn't it? Like, he's the big
That's
dog.
Roman Reigns, yes.
And I was like, I've seen this
He's the big dog.
somewhere before. That's another person where I'm mystified why crowds hate Roman Reigns. Like, why do they hate Roman Reigns? Is there an answer to that?
It's more to do with the behind the scenes stuff. He's Vince's chosen boy, and for a long period of time, Vince just kept putting him on top and on top and on top, and the crowd just weren't reacting to it at first, and then it sort of became we're reacting to this out of spite.
Yeah.
Because we just don't want the guy that Vince wants, because we wanted Daniel Bryan, he wanted Roman Reigns got the spot. So we booed Roman Reigns. That was kind of how it went down.
Yeah, because, I mean, I haven't seen a lot because, like I said, don't really care about the men of WWE. But what I have seen, it's really interesting listening to the different pitches of the cheers / the boos. And it's the women and the children cheering. And I totally understand why the women are cheering, because he is very handsome.
Yeah. And for the children, he's the superhero. He always gets back up and hits that and kids can get into that. So, but it's very much the grown men who don't want to be told who their favorite guy is. They want to pick their favorite guy. Yeah. Right. They want to pick who they think is the best wrestler. And I think we're gonna have some problems at the moment with the Seth Rollins and the Fiend stuff. And they did that whole horror movie style finish at Hell in a Cell. And the crowd were turning on Seth Rollins because the crowd are all enjoying the Fiend, but then Seth Rollins got to keep the championship and everyone was like, that's bullcrap. So I think we're going to see people potentially turn on Seth Rollins as well in a similar way because he's not their guy. But we're getting way off in the weeds. I want to come back to MCW 9.
Sure.
I want to come back to MCW 9. The women's championship.
Yes.
I'm not going to just ask you who your pick to win is. I want us to go through. I've got the first round matchups in front of me. I've got the brackets in front of me.
Yes.
And we're going to predict every step of the way. Do you think you can do it?
I do. All
right.
If I'm right about this, I just want to put it out there. I'm going to be so smug and you will never hear the end of it. Because I totally predicted Brooksy would win the ballroom brawl, and I totally predicted Dowie would run out during that match. So if I get 3 in a row right, I will never shut up, ever.
Yeah, well, but picking an entire tournament, that's difficult. If you can pick the entire tournament, man, like, I don't know, I have nothing to offer, but there has to be some kind of prize.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty impressive if you can pick the whole thing. So let's say, first round, we've got Candy Lee versus Xena.
Yeah. So I don't know either of these wrestlers terribly well, but I've seen them each wrestle once, I think. So Xena is part of Lux, that's right?
Yes,
and they drink
Lux
tea.
with the tea.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I saw Candy Lee wrestle at one of the girl shows. I think she wrestled Avery. And I am going to say that Candy Lee is going to win this one, but there's no intellectual reasoning behind this. It's just because I really like her. Like, I loved her in that match. And also, maybe there is a little bit of narrative reasoning. Because Lux are a duo, I think it's harder for them to go further in the tournament because they're so tied to each other. I feel like that maybe necessarily wouldn't make great narrative sense.
Yeah, well, each of them are going to be focused on their own individual match, so whether they're going to be able to be there for each other in the capacity they normally would, and that could be their downfall.
Yeah. And also,
that makes sense to me.
If on night 2, I am kind of suspecting that they'll put the 4 first round losers in a match together. Because I did hear somewhere, can't remember where, that there'll also be 4 women's matches on night 2. So if you've got 2 semis and a final, then it makes sense that you've got some, like, the first 4 losers go in a match together. And I think if you have both of the Lux girls in that match, then you'll be able to do more compelling storytelling with them both there together.
Yeah, absolutely. And whether it's a 4-way or even you could end up making it a tag team match because they are a tag team. So that works too. All right, so then we've got Avery and Steph DeLander.
Oh, this is the hardest one, I think, because they're, like, the way I see it, now that Indy Hartwell has gone, there are 3 serious contenders for this belt who are kind of MCW regulars, and Avery and Steph DeLander are 2 of them. So it is really, really hard to pick this one. And I think, and perhaps right at the end I will reveal my grand overall prediction because I've thought about this a lot. But I think Steph DeLander is going to win this match. And it's mostly because they filmed that little promo with her and Kellyanne. And I'm like, oh, why would you tease that rivalry if that wasn't going to be realized at some point in a match? And
A little bit of foreshadowing.
yeah, and Steph DeLander is such a good villain that I think keeping her in the tournament for a while makes a lot of sense. That said, Avery is such a superstar, so it's really hard to pick against her, but I've got some theories, which I will reveal in the fullness of time.
Yeah, see, well, this is one of those things too, right? If you're picking Candy Lee to go over, then you kind of want her to be going up against Steph DeLander, not Avery, because Avery versus Candy Lee, who are the crowd going to cheer for? You can't really just, like, they're going to cheer for Avery, but you can't just make Candy Lee the heel. She's adorable.
Yeah.
So it's, so I'm following your thinking here, and I'm loving it.
And also, Avery
Kellyanne-
and Candy Lee fought at the girl show, if I'm right. So we've
Yes,
kind
they
of
did,
seen that one before, whereas we haven't seen Steph DeLander versus Candy Lee.
Yeah, absolutely. So then we've got Kellyanne and Kingsley. I think we both know who's going over
Clearly
here.
Kellyanne, because that's the third obvious contender. I think it's got to be Avery, Steph DeLander, or Kellyanne. It's got to be one of those three. I'd be extremely surprised if it wasn't.
Yeah, definitely. Not to poo-poo Kingsley at all, because Kingsley is one of my favorites. I absolutely love her gimmick, and her promo videos are on point. So big fan of Kingsley, but I think it's very clear Kellyanne's going to win there. Tali and Jessica Troy.
So I only know these two wrestlers very tangentially, and the thing I remember Tali best from was like beating Kellyanne at that girl match that then turned into the brawl instantly, because it was building up to that big like Kellyanne, Avery, Indy Hartwell triple threat. And it was that one where Avery jumped off the balcony and I thought she was dead. Oh my goodness. But I am going to go with Jessica Troy in this match. This is the one I'm least certain about, I think. And it's purely because I've seen more of Jessica Troy. And also she and Kellyanne teamed up a little bit recently. So I think you'd have a more compelling narrative in the semi-finals because they were teammates and now they're wrestling each other. So you've got more opportunity for like stronger storytelling, I think.
See, the fact that you think like a storyteller means that you think like a good pro wrestling booker, because I'm loving the way you're booking this tournament right here. And as well, the little bit that you wouldn't know, Jessica Troy, for my money, she's my favorite wrestler in Australia at the moment, male or female, across the entire country, because I keep across all the promotions. She's the PWWA champion in Sydney at the moment, which was a women's championship that they've recently opened up, and it's just all their titles now are open gender, open weight sort of situation, right?
That's super.
And so she's the champion up there. Yeah, and she's had her and Kellyanne had a match which was currently sitting at number 2 on my match of the year list for this year.
Oh wow!
They had a match at Wrestling Go, which was a fantastic match, and because of that match has been booked elsewhere in the country. They had a rematch at Wrestling Go a couple months later, and then they had they were both booked to go to Queensland for, I want to say it was AWA, booked the same match, Kellyanne versus Jessica Troy. They just have magic when they get in the ring together. They put on good, like I know you said you don't know necessarily what the technical wrestling is, but when these two go in there, they put on really good technical wrestling match. And so having that on the MCW stage, very attractive.
Yeah.
So that would become the semi-final. Yeah.
And the one reason why I don't think Jessica Troy is a contender to win the tournament is purely because she's not an MCW regular. And I think for the first title belt, at least, you can't kind of give it to a fly-in. It's got to be someone that's there and around, like, all the time.
There every show. Yeah. Preferably on the girl shows, the wrestle shows, all those shows. Like, you want them to be someone who's there. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Steph DeLander, though, is a fly-in.
Is she? I didn't pick that at all.
She's from Sydney, yeah. She's a Sydney girl.
Well, I think because she's just been so regularly on the last few shows, I just assumed she was here to stay.
Yeah, unless she moved, which but the last time I checked, she's still a Sydney girl, so, because she does PWA as well, but yeah. So the way you've got it, we've got Candy Lee versus Steph DeLander in the semi-final. Mm-hmm.
And I think, much as I love Candy Lee, I think it's got to be Steph DeLander that wins that one. I think you've got to send a heel through to the final.
Yeah. Yep, makes sense. And then Kellyanne and Jessica Troy, and you've got Kellyanne going to the final.
So I think we've got to see Kellyanne versus Steph DeLander in the semi-final. But then, this is what I think. This is where I think the twist comes in. If you've got those 4 women who lost in the first round fighting in some kind of match, whether that's a tag team match or just like the 4 of them all fighting each other, whatever, there's got to be some kind of stakes to that. There's got to be some kind of prize. And so my feeling is that maybe this match is the second last. This is what I would do anyway, if I was like just thinking about this like a writer and also someone that has a lot of background in narrative theory. Like my other expertise is genre, which is why I'm really interested in wrestling as a genre and how that works. But what I would do is have that match with the final 4 women be the second last match of the night, have the winner of that match go into the final as well. So the final has 3 women in it, but the one who's come out of the 4-way match is at a disadvantage, which is fair because they lost in the first round. So they've come straight out of this like 4-way match and they have to go right into the final. I think that will be Avery. And so I think in the final we will see Avery, Steph DeLander and Kellyanne. I'm torn as to what I think the final result will be, but this is what I would do. Have Avery do a bunch of the work to take out Steph DeLander and Kellyanne be the one to capitalize, setting up a rivalry between Kellyanne and Avery, which could then become like the primary rivalry for the women's championship.
Right. So Kellyanne, the wily veteran, takes advantage of all the hard work that underdog Avery, having just come out of another match and not even being, prepared to be in this extra match, and she does all the work, and Kellyanne, the wily veteran, sort of snakes the win away from her.
Yeah, absolutely. And like it's feel good in a way because I think like Kellyanne is like foundational to the women's division in MCW.
Yes,
yeah,
100%.
So I think her winning the belt, there's something we talk about in genre studies all the time, which is that genre relies on an idea of emotional justice. Like in a romance novel, the 2 people get together at the end, but it doesn't feel good unless that ending's been earned. You've got to have emotional justice. In a crime novel, you've got to feel like the detective has done the work to solve the mystery. So that ending, like you get that sense of emotional justice. I think Kellyanne winning that women's championship would give us emotional justice, but it would also set up further opportunities because Avery would feel like that win was very unjust. And so then you've got momentum to move narrative forward because like soap opera, wrestling evades closure. So if you are going to go for an ending with emotional justice, you also have to put in place a strategy to think about where the story is going to go next, because it's not like a romance novel or a crime novel where the couple get together or the mystery is solved and then the book is over. You then have to think about what happens at the next show. And so you need that momentum to move the narrative forward. And so, if I was putting the plot together, that's what I would do, because you would get both that feel-good, oh, Kellyanne won the belt moment, but also Avery would be furious, and you would have a place for the narrative to go next.
Yeah, it's a big twist too, adding in that second chance fatal 4-way match.
And maybe they don't even know.
And that match would have such stakes.
Yeah.
That match would have such stakes because as well, like internally in that match, the way you've booked it, you've got Xena and Kingsley there, so they have an instant advantage.
Yeah. And you could
That's amazing. I love it.
You could also turn them against each other at some point, because even though they're a team, they would each want to be the one that went into, that won the match. So you could have like periods in that match where it is Xena versus Kingsley, and how do they cope with that emotionally? Like, what does that look like? But and that could allow like someone like Avery, who is so smart in terms of like her wrestling persona, like Avery's a clever wrestler, that would allow her to capitalize. And even if you maybe the women don't even know that this is what the prize for winning this match is. Maybe it's all a big surprise, and then right at the end the announcer's like, haha, guess what, Avery, you're in the final, and it's now, off you go.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm a big fan of your fantasy book. Can someone get you a job? You would write way better WWE than WWE. I feel like you've thought about this. You've really thought about this.
Well, I mean, I have a lot of expertise in understanding how story works. It is literally both of my jobs. Like as a writer, I have to understand how narrative fits together, or my books would be very bad. And I like to think that they're not very bad. I like to think they're okay. But also, I study narrative, and I have spent so many years thinking about how stories fit together. And I mean, this is a lot of the analysis I do of The Bachelor. Is I can pick who's going to win it very early because of the way the narrative is constructed.
The way they're editing the show to tell the story.
I have an excellent track record in picking winners. So. And that's one of the reasons why I like to ask so many questions at the end of each MCW show, because I'm trying to build up there's this idea that we talk about in scholarship sometimes, comes from Australian scholars, Lisa Fletcher, Beth Driscoll, and Kim Wilkins, called genre competence. The idea that you you understand what the codes of a certain genre are. You become fluent in it. So like I can look at the cover of a romance novel and I can probably tell you just from looking at the cover what kind of story we're going to be in, because I'm very, very fluent in that genre. But when I first started going along to MCW shows, I was just not conversant with wrestling at all. I had no genre competence. So I like to think that over the past year or so, I've been building up that level of competence. And by asking so many questions, I've been able to work a few things out, leading to my now outstanding track record of totally being able to predict what happens. I say outstanding track record, it's 2 shows. But still, I was very proud of myself. I felt like
It's a role to be on. It's a good role. You're on a roll.
And even if it doesn't play out exactly the way that I think it will, I would like to think that my version is also pretty good.
I enjoyed your version of how MCW NINE should go this weekend. Now, but before we go, I want to bring us back to the wrestling romance novels.
Mm-hmm.
People need to find. We'll give the people your Twitter at the end of this because your Twitter is amazing. Like after MCW show, you always have hilarious takes. I can't remember what it was you said about the Phillip brothers, but it was something about their jackets.
I love their jackets. They're Regal Cape vests. Oh,
how good are the vests?
I love them.
But I'm a big fan of your takes and your tweets throughout the MCW shows are hilarious. And obviously the questions, they've served a greater purpose because now here we are sitting here talking about fantasy booking wrestling. And that's some of the best damn fantasy booking I've ever heard.
Oh, but, thank you. I feel so honored.
Back to the wrestling. Well, we love a good fantasy book here. As wrestling fans, every wrestling fan thinks they know how to book the territory better than anyone else. Like that's just how it works. And I thoroughly enjoyed listening to that. But yeah, these wrestling romance novels, you've been hunting for a good one, and you've yet to necessarily find one. So you've said that you think you might have an idea. Don't give away your idea that you want to do. But let's go with a completely other, because I do recall a tweet where you said that you could think of about 10 basic plots off the top of your head that would be better. So can we just get one? Just one. Not the one that you're going to go with. But
yeah. Well, look, I think there's like such good potential with different wrestling personas, like with the kind of on stage, off stage. Is it called kayfabe? Is that a word? Am I saying that right?
Yep. Kayfabe.
I think there's such incredible narrative potential in that. So one very popular trope in romance fiction is the fake dating trope. So anyone that's seen To All the Boys I've Loved Before, that's a classic example of the fake dating trope. And I think you could do a really good wrestling romance with a fake dating trope where 2 people are like in ring romantically involved and maybe they don't care for each other off stage, or maybe they're friends. You could bring in, there are other tropes, enemies to lovers and friends to lovers are both romance tropes as well. And so you could just smash a whole different bunch of those tropes together and tell, like that's 2 ideas right there. You've got fake dating enemies to lovers, fake dating friends to lovers. Basically what you could do, this is how I teach my creative writing students about tropes, is I tell them to go on AO3, Archive of Our Own, and don't look for a fandom necessarily, but look at how you can sort by trope, which like Archive of Our Own just won a Hugo for their tagging system. It's phenomenal. And I think you could take pretty much any trope off that list and apply it to wrestling in a really interesting and like fun way. And there was some weird stuff going on in the publishing industry in 2011 through 2013 where they were taking a lot of like fanfic and self-published romances off the internet, and they were traditionally publishing them, and that led to a wave because of Jamie Maguire's Beautiful Disaster, very bad book by the way, of MMA romances. And now there are thousands and thousands of MMA romances, but I've managed to find maybe 10 pro wrestling romances. And it's wild to me that this is not a space that has been more exploited, because there are so many narrative possibilities.
Yeah.
What I want to do actually.
Maybe it's because wrestling has its own language though as well, that I guess you'd need to learn to write about wrestling, or if you're this
is one of the reasons
it's kind of a whole thing.
Yeah, why I don't feel qualified to write about it myself currently, because I don't know the language well enough. Like, I know what face is, I know what heel is, I now know what kayfabe is. That's pretty fun. But I only just learned what, like, the way the word over is used in wrestling. Like, I've never come across that before. So, but what I would eventually like to do, I have this, like, little idea in my mind for a book that's like a soap opera. And I think I could get, like, a little pro wrestler character in there, because wrestling and soap opera are so generically similar that that could marry up really well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other question I have with relation to this fictional, like this imaginary book we're writing here of a wrestling romance novel. If you're going to base one of the main protagonists off someone in the world of MCW, it can't be one of your favorites. So it can't be Dowie, and it can't be the three main girls that you've mentioned there, Indy, Avery, and Kellyanne. Who are you going to base the main protagonist off?
Oh, look, I think whatever answer I say is going to come across really creepy. Yeah.
I'm trying to get you. I'm trying to get you heat. Is that a word you've come across?
That's when people react to you. Yeah, but badly? Is it negative?
Yeah. So heat is like boo, like and a pop is when people cheer. But like as well with the backstage vernacular, if you get heat with someone, like someone doesn't like you because of something you've done or said, or yeah.
Actually, you know what I would do is if I was going to, like, maybe I wouldn't write it personally, but a romance novel I'd like to see an MM romance. I'd like to see a queer one. Get the Brat Pack in there. There's a romance for you.
So, you know, there's an entire world. I don't know if you've found this yet. There's an entire world of like slash fiction with wrestling online, like specifically with wrestling, and there's so many of. Do you remember The Shield?
Oh yeah, that's one of the few things I do remember from watching WWE late at night, and the reason I remember them is because their ideology is extremely similar to the ideology of Sailor Moon. So my sister and I used to refer to them as the Sailor Scouts, and then we didn't remember their actual name for a really long time.
Amazing. Well, yeah, there's a lot of slash fiction of the Sailor Scouts online.
I am
that you can find.
Entirely unsurprised. Actually, when I got interested in kind of the Seth Becky romance, I went on to AO3 and I was like, okay, what pairings are really popular? And they're like number 9, and the 8 before them are all MM. They're all dudes.
Yeah, which is something that we'd go off on a completely different discussion if we were to go into it, but like queer representation in wrestling and stuff is something that's been lacking a lot.
Yeah.
It's getting a lot better now, and it's coming along, and I think Australia is quite good at it as well. We've got quite a few queer wrestlers that doing amazing things. So that's a whole other area to go into.
Actually, my favorite match that I've ever seen at MCW, and it was in one of the first shows I saw, was that farewell match for Jonah Rock and Elliot Sexton, where it was the 3-way tag team match. So there was them, there was the Brat Pack, and then there was the Loose and the Reckless, which, by the way, if they ever want me to write a soap opera called The Loose and the Reckless, I will do that. I think that is a great soap opera name. But they all kissed.
Yes, they did. Everyone started kissing. So here's how we get the Loose and Reckless into MCW canon.
Yes.
Right? As a soap opera. Dowie gets a storyline concussion.
Oh,
and it plays out
amnesia.
in his head.
You could do an amnesia.
It plays out in his head, yeah. It'd be amazing.
Oh,
they should bring you on to consult. I
would gladly consult. I would write them a little soap opera. I would love that so much. That would delight.
There you go, Mikey J.
Yeah,
book it, Mikey J.
If you ever want someone to write your little soap opera skits, I am there for you. I know I have 2 full-time jobs, but I will make time.
You'll find time somewhere. You know what came across my desk earlier this week? There's a wrestling musical in Sydney.
Really?
In 2020. Yes, it's called Dubbo Championship Wrestling. I think it was Hayes Theatre Company.
Oh, the Hayes is an amazing theatre. I used to review there all the time when I was living in Sydney.
Yeah, they're in I think it was in March or May 2020, and they're doing Dubbo Championship Wrestling. It's written by some guys from Sydney, and it's a musical based in a fictional Australian wrestling world.
Oh, I am totally going to see that. I'm in Sydney all the time because my whole family lives in Wollongong, so I'm gonna time.
As soon as I saw it, I'm like, I need to fly up there for this. I have to.
Yeah. That sounds dope. Oh, that's so exciting. I'm also available to write the book for musicals. Just putting that out there. Not that you can't do that, but I could write the lyrics.
Amazing. All right, so where can people find you if they want to get you to write their book for their musical of pro wrestling or anything else online? Where can people find your work?
So I'm extremely easily Googleable. I've got a website, which is jodimcallister.com.au, mostly about my books, but you can find other stuff there. Probably the best place where the social media I'm most active on is Twitter, which is Jodi, Jodimca. But I'm also on Instagram. I've got a Facebook page, like an author page. I'm findable. I'm not a hidden secret person. You may
Just
have noticed.
type in the name.
Yeah, my love for wrestling is extremely public, hence my strange little cult following that I've got for knowing nothing about it.
Yeah, well, it's been very entertaining to watch, and it's been an amazing chat. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Look, it is wild to me that people want to talk to me about wrestling because so much of my life revolves around being an expert at something, and this is something I'm aggressively not an expert in. So the fact that people want my opinions on it is just delightful.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So there you have it. Jodi McAllister, ladies and gentlemen. Her Twitter is hilarious. When she's at the wrestling shows, her Twitter is hilarious. It's informative, and she's asking lots of questions. It's a lot of fun to engage with Jodi on Twitter, and check out her work. Check out the things she does. Support other people that are in our little wrestling family as this little wrestling family grows. We're very happy to have Jodi on board, and welcome to wrestling fandom, Jodi. Now, if you like that and you like other Aussie Grappler and Grappler adjacent person interviews, make sure you check out On the Turnbuckle this week, Jessica Troy, who is, of course, competing in the MCW NINE Women's Championship Tournament. She is on the Turnbuckle this week. She's also heading into Coliseum next week. I'm flying up to Sydney. I'm going to see Jessica Troy take part in the Coliseum. She's my pick to win it. I say that about everyone. I've had about 8 picks to win it. There's 8 competitors. Anyway, it's going to be an amazing tournament. Jessica Troy on the Turnbuckle this week. Also, Wrestle Radio Australia sat down and caught up with Big Brody Marshall. I think it was a part 1 of 2. I haven't got a chance to listen to it yet. Life has been crazy lately. There's a lot of wrestling to consume. And there's a lot of wrestling to consume this weekend all across Australia if you are in Perth tonight, Friday night. EPW Showcase 7, top of the class at the EPW School of Pro Wrestling. As always, head to the Facebook if you want more information about any of these shows. In Sydney, we got Wrestling Go tonight presenting Somebody Once Told Me. It was really hard not to sing that because it's, the Shrek song, All-Star, all that stuff. Somebody Once Told Me. That's at the Marion Community Centre. IWA are in Gunnedah tonight and in Tamworth on Saturday for the Wrestle Revolution 3 tour. And on Sunday, Future Wrestling Australia present their Civil War Halloween special at Dural Country Club. That one's also streaming live on YouTube. Love all the live streaming Aussie wrestling. No excuse not to watch it wherever you are in the country. Future Wrestling Australia on Sunday. Head to the YouTube to check that one out. Or if you're in the area, head out to Dural Country Club. In my hometown tonight, RCW are back at HQ for Rocktoberfest. And Alpha Pro Wrestling in Melbourne, they're doing All or Nothing. They're returning with All or Nothing at the Glenroy Bowls Club tomorrow night, Saturday night. But of course, the big one, Friday and Saturday night at the Thornbury Theatre in Melbourne. 2 nights, incredible action, huge women's championship tournament, big flying guest Hartley Jackson making his return to indie wrestling. You got Will Ospreay is going to be there teaming with Kyle Fletcher. Of course, because Mark Davis couldn't do it, so he was injured, so he's not able to. We can't get Aussie Open, but we've got Will Ospreay with Kyle Fletcher. Big guests on that show. It's going to be an amazing show. Definitely get out and check it out. Support the boys and girls who do the thing we love, that is Australian professional wrestling. Cheer the good guys, boo the bad guys. You know what to do. It's all about supporting Aussie wrestlers. And if you want to support us and what we do here at the B+, you can do that at patreon.com/theb+wrestling. At patreon.com/theb+. You can find me on Twitter and Stationhead, where I spin wrestling-related tunes and talk wrestling throughout the week at various times. At Greg Unchained on those places, at the Greg Unchained on Instagram. Collectively, we are the B+ Wrestle on Twitter because wrestling wouldn't fit. The B+ Wrestling everywhere else. Like, share, subscribe, 5-star review if you like what we do. And thank you so much for listening.